Hello, reader. I'm Alix.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is
the Litjoy Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by our Valeris bookshelf alley. If any product could be like bookmarked on your calendar, make it this one. We have sold out of this product so quickly that we decided to bring it back, but it is as a pre-order. So the goal is to open it up for a sales window long enough for everyone who wants to buy it to be able to jump in and get it. The sales period is January 26th through February 19th, correct? Correct. And mark your calendar. I think if you go to our website, you can actually sign up to be notified. It's litjoycrate.com/Valeris, Velaris, which is a nod to the fact that the Bookshelf Alley takes place in Valeris during Starfall with Feyre and Rhysand. It's just a very beloved little alley that fits right in between your books. It's beautiful. So make sure to go sign up to be notified, and we out.
We also want to tell you guys about our reading journal that we have in stock right now. This is one of my favorite items that we've ever created. It is something that we try to keep in stock at all times, and it's perfect right now with the new year happening. It's a great way to keep track of your reading goals. There are so many different kinds of pages in there that are interactive. We've got lots of fun pages for tracking the books you've read. You know, there's book to movies. There's lots of pages where you can keep track of the books from all over the world. I'm trying to remember what that page is.
Yeah, there's like world travel pages.
Yeah.
There's also like bookshelf pages where you can fill in your book titles and color them in. So it's just like a really beautiful way to interact with your reading.
I love it because then you can really just keep track of your review, your star rating, your thoughts, favorite quote, things like that as well. And these are perfect for book clubs. I actually did give these out to everyone in my book club last year. Everyone's very excited to start filling them out. So just wanted to remind everyone to go check out those reading journals, and they do come in several colors.
And we are stoked to be here today to talk to you. Stoked. I feel like that ages me just a bit. Like all the youths,
so rad.
All the youths are like, what the?
The youth.
The youths. I do notice I'm getting older though, because I go to the grocery store and I'm angry at everyone who's younger than me.
I feel that deeply.
I'm just like, don't you know how to use a turn signal, you child? It's probably like a 25-year-old.
Amazing. I've been there a while. Welcome.
Welcome.
I'm always mumbling while I'm driving.
I feel like I've always been kind of an old soul. Like I remember being in college and being like, nobody here should have a license.
I love this.
I know.
This is great.
This has nothing to do with what this episode is about, but we're happy you're here.
We'll just segue right into it.
And with that transition, today we'll be talking about Book Your Ticket. Get it? Book Your Ticket.
Wink,
I'm
wink.
winking for those of you who can see. Books that made us nostalgic for travel.
Yes.
Yes.
This is a fun episode.
We can't tell yet, but we think it will be.
No, I'm really excited. I'm like, it was fun to put together because obviously that's the beauty about reading books is that you want to be transported.
100%.
Sometimes that is into a completely different fantasy world. And sometimes it's to real places.
Well, okay, that's a great point. We should do a whole follow-up episode of like fantasy places we want to travel to. Like fantasy worlds. Mm-hmm. I love this idea.
I know. I had the idea too. I was like,
write that down.
We got to do this.
He's like pretending to write it.
And then today we're talking about books that make you want to travel to places that actually exist. And then it sounds like we'll have a follow-up.
That is if you believe we're not in a simulation, but yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah.
Just kidding.
We talked about that in our part 1
of the book club?
Of our deep discussion books.
Oh, yes.
We were talking about like living in the Matrix, like 50% of...
physicists.
Physicists, that's right.
Yes.
Believe that we are living in a simulation. And it's fascinating.
I know.
But we digress.
We digress. So one thing I do love, okay, so Kelly and I both have a deep passion for travel as well.
Yes.
So I'm like, it goes like books, travel, and then everything else.
Family's up there somewhere. But, you know,
they hover in the top 3. We don't
bounce between 1 and 2.
But so I love that there's books that literally just, when you think about the book, you think about the place and you want to be there. And I feel like also the authors on this list do a good job of immersing you.
Yes.
But yes, 100%. So number 1 is no surprise. Kelly did the draft of this list. And I'm just like, number 1 for Kelly is number 1 for Kelly.
Well, and number 1 for a lot of people.
Fair.
I'm all fair. Which is Outlander.
Yes.
By Dana Gabaldon.
Gabaldon.
And it takes place in Scotland, right? The Highlands, but back in like the late 1700s. So
yes.
But then you get transported. So
it's a time travel book for those of you who don't know. Actually, Diana, she was like, I saw in an interview, someone was like, "You're historical fiction," and she's all, "No, it's a sci-fi."
Yeah.
And I was like, there's like one time travel event and she's all, "It's science fiction." But
yeah,
it's her book.
I remember that. And it's true. I guess it is sci-fi technically. But it is historical fiction as well, because she obviously documents things that are all based in history, talking about the different clans and the wars going on back then. So let's start over. The premise is about a nurse. She's on her honeymoon with her husband soon after World War II ends. They got married and immediately basically got separated.
Yes. Yeah. Like married, and then World War II began, and she was a nurse and he was a general. Yeah. And so they didn't see each other for the span of World War II. And so they're finally reunited and they go on a honeymoon up to the Highlands.
They're in Scotland at this cute town, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. Anyway, so she goes on a drive because he's like trying to do some research for, he's
just
a professor.
Fiving hard.
Yeah, he's a professor and wants to learn more, and he's doing research on like different ancestors and historical figures. And so she's like, "Cool, I support this, but I'm also going to go."
She's like, "I'm going to go explore on my own."
That's a nicer way to say it. So she goes because she's also really into like herbs and plants and flowers, and loves to learn more. So
like medicinally, because she's a nurse.
She's a nurse.
I'll just keep piping in with these little extra facts.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And she ends up at the stones. Now the stones are interesting because
they're megaliths, by the way.
Yes.
They're like giant stones in a circular formation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, similar to something like Stonehenge, right?
Yes.
But in Scotland. And the night before had actually watched these women kind of sneak out to go perform, what would you call it? Like a ritual?
Ceremony.
Like a ceremony, a ritual?
Yes.
They kind of like.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, they're all dressed in white with like these like lantern type things.
I'm just like, "Sing me a song of a lass that is gone."
So basically the town knows that there's something special about this place. There's an energy about it. And so they like to do these rituals, these ceremonies, because it kind of keeps the flow of their town and their life moving forward, and with Mother Earth and all these things. And so she finds it fascinating. So she goes back to visit by herself when everyone's gone, and is just looking at the flowers. Then she hears this buzzing sound, and it's coming from one of the big stones in the middle of the monolith. And she puts her hand up to it, and all of a sudden you hear like that.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then she disappears. She's gone. Yeah. And it's just her shawl that's left. Okay. She transports back to Scotland in 1740s, back to Scotland, right? And just is like dumped in the middle. And she's like, "What's happening?" And all of a sudden, someone who looks like her husband is coming up to her. He looks like he's in like a costume, right? From like an old war.
He looks like a red coat.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where she realizes, like, what is going on? And she's like, "Frank, what's going on?" And he's like, "I'm not Frank." Yeah. And he's like the villain, right?
Jack Randall.
Yeah. So
you guys, I just feel like Outlander is so iconic.
I love it.
It was a fantastic book club read. It was like, I love the show. I don't know. It's one of those ones where like, I want to go to the Scottish Highlands every time I think about it.
Even just thinking about it.
Because it's so gorgeous. It's beautiful. And we live in an area that kind of looks like the Highlands, because I think we're both really drawn to like trees and like these beautiful mountains in Utah. Like Utah is very mountainous. But I'm like, my homeland is Scotland.
I know. We have not been to Scotland yet.
It's on the calendar for this year.
This year. We've been talking about it for years.
I know.
So we're
just
ready.
Like saving our little pennies. And this year it's happening.
So when I was researching this book a little bit about travel, it's like the books for sure got people interested, but the TV series really got people interested,
Yes.
So we've got 9 books, 6 seasons of Outlander.
I thought she just announced her 10th book too.
9 books out.
Okay.
9 books that are published. 10 will be her final book. And then I don't know if they're going to go through all 10 seasons.
I think the final season they just started the final season of Outlander.
I'll be honest. I watched, I think 5 seasons, but then maybe, after that I kind of had to stop. But
it kind of got to be
I have a delicate constitution to some things. And back then specifically, the rape is happening like in every book.
Like every book.
Yeah. There was always something very traumatic, right? Like that's what keeps the books going. But what I was going to say is that the tourism in Scotland has skyrocketed.
That's
thanks
awesome.
to Diana.
Thanks, Diana.
Yeah. And you can do full Outlander tours, which I'm
amazing.
Like, please go visit all of the different filming sets and locations.
Lallybroch.
Oh, Lallybroch. Yes, it's beautiful. And it's open for visitors.
It's amazing.
So,
I'm like, I get why this is your favorite. Scotland. From the moment I met Kelly, she's like, I love Scotland.
I haven't been there, but I feel called.
Yes, 100%.
And, it's going to be such a great trip.
All right. Next up on the list, this one's a no-brainer. Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I like Elizabeth Gilbert. Her books always have kind of like this like optimism that I feel like is just really inspirational. I read a couple of her other books and I just feel like she's so good at optimism. But this one in particular literally made you want to go to all of the places and eat the food. Which, it's like eating food. When we travel, I'm all, let's plan the food first, everything else second.
And what I love this quote I'm going to read about this book because it says, this book comes from a place of privilege, but doesn't all travel? As it follows the author on her journey of self-discovery as she eats, prays, and finds love in Italy, India, and Indonesia. It's like the 3 I's to remember. Because I know there were a lot of mixed reviews on this book because people were kind of being like, well, wouldn't that be nice if we could all just like uproot our lives and go travel the world? And that was kind of like some of the critics' view of it. And I'm all, just enjoy the journey of what she experienced and what it meant, But it absolutely gave me that wanderlust to want to go travel to all these places.
Yeah, the point of the book wasn't to be like, it wasn't like a humanitarian effort.
Yeah.
It was a place of privilege. And it was wanderlust. And so I'm like, I love it. I think that that's exactly what you experienced when you were reading it. And you wanted the main character to find love. And you wanted to eat pizza in Italy with her. And you wanted to eat ice cream. And
I think about that a lot. That one moment in Italy where her and her friend, they've been eating and loving all the pastas and stuff. And they go shopping and they literally can't zip up their pants.
Yes.
And her friend is so devastated. She's like, oh, I gotta stop eating. And she's like, why? Just go up the next pant size. Men will still love you. Basically.
She's like, has a man ever looked at you naked and been like, nope?
And she's like, you're right. And it just like hit for me where I'm like, that's true. Like I put that pressure on myself. The man is perfectly happy. Whatever size.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I've had to go through such an interesting journey with my body. I'm like, and loving my body. I love that part too. That part sticks out to me so much. And in fact, every time I go to eat something really delicious and I feel that inner critic, I actually think about this book and that moment because I'm like, no one has ever, that I really love and care about has never told me like I need to stop eating so that I look a certain way. Like they've always loved me at every size. And so I love that. I didn't, that wasn't why we put it on there, but it's true.
I think about that moment a lot too. And I'm like, oh, that is interesting. It really stuck out. Her time in India didn't stick with me as intensely as Italy and Indonesia.
Yes.
It was fascinating because she was frustrated. She had to learn to be quiet and be still. And so that was fascinating because I was like, that would be me being like,
me too.
I've been silent for an hour, and it's supposed to be like all day for like a week or something like that. But that's where she really learns how to Zen. And I'm curious though, out of the 3 locations, is there a place that you were more drawn to?
Oh, that's a hard one. Okay. So I'm probably drawn to Italy the most for the food. And I've been to Italy. And so I feel like there's like deeper, like neural highways in my brain that think about going back to Italy, right? And that have experiences around it. And so it's like more present in my mind. But Indonesia is very high on my list of places I want to travel to. And so those 2 kind of stick out to me. It's interesting because I'm very interested in a lot of the things she learned in India. I just don't feel as called to travel there. But I mean, the list is like every country on my mind. And I'm just like, which ones can I get to sooner, So we've talked about going to Bali in Indonesia. But I have a feeling Italy might come up first. But who knows?
I need to get to Italy.
I love Italy. I will take you to Italy. We could leave tomorrow. I loved Italy.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like Italy felt like home, but it was like a delicious experience from beginning to end. Yeah. And we got to go to Venice before it sinks. Well, or before we melt the polar ice caps and flood it.
It's got to go.
I'm like, global warming isn't funny, but we'll get to Venice.
On that note, I was drawn more to Indonesia, Bali, which is surprising because I'm not normally drawn to more tropical climates.
Yes.
I'm always like, send me somewhere that's like permanently
Fall.
autumn or fall,
Yeah.
like the Cotswolds or, somewhere over in UK or New Zealand or something. I don't know. But that one, I just remember feeling a spiritual connection in some form and wanting to go meet the elephants and just enjoy nature in a different way. So but I remember really struggling and being like, I want to go to all of them, including India at the time. But I think since then I've been like, well, maybe not. My husband's been a couple times. And so I kind of feel like I've lived through it with him and his many illnesses that he's returned with while visiting. So that's where I'm like, maybe later.
Like, we're too delicate. I feel like it's a us problem.
But I feel like this was one of the first books that came to mind when I was thinking about places that I'd wanted to visit, because she did such a good job of making you fall in love with each country.
Totally.
So
I love it.
Moving on to number 3.
Right. We just talked about this one in our last episode, so we won't go into a ton of detail. But the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Society, this book is one that takes place on the island of Guernsey, just between England and France. And when the Nazis occupied France, they were on their way to occupy England, and they only got as far as Guernsey. And then that's when the U.S. joined the army, or joined the war efforts. And so this is from the perspective of a writer from London and a book club in Guernsey and their correspondence and all that ensues.
Yep.
And Guernsey is this charming little mountainous rolling hill, beachy island.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we should go there on our witch journey this year.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I all of us, after reading this for book club, everyone was like, we want to go to Guernsey because, she does such a beautiful job, the author, in making it like a love letter to the island. She talks about a lot of the things that are on the island, specific places, moments, and everyone was just so enthralled with it. We had like a whole PowerPoint at the time to show all the things that were brought up in the book. And they talk at one point about this little chapel that is all made out of like glass bottles, things like that. It's like, you can fit in it like 2 people, and that's about as big as the whole chapel is. Like, it's just made by like little pieces that they've recycled to put together.
It feels like a fairy tale island. Yeah. Like, it feels like this fairy tales come to life. Like it feels kind of like an extension of that magic you find in like the Cotswolds, or like.
Yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure fairies live there.
Yes.
Or like the Will-o'-the-Wisps or something. Like, it's magical. And it's like a seaside getaway for a lot of places in England.
Yes.
They'll go there they'll summer there.
They'll summer there. No, or they'll visit in the summer.
Yeah.
I know we've been to a couple of those spots, but we went in the dead of winter and they're like, why are you here? And we're like, well, we're American and this is pretty warm.
I know. They're like, it's like 55 and I'm all, this is great.
Yeah, like it's beach weather. But no, that would be wonderful. Let's do our witch tour through the UK and we'll stop in Guernsey. We'll do a full like day tour, stay the night.
Okay. We're all so absolutely adding it to
Welcome to our to our planning.
Okay.
So just a charming little island. Okay, number 4. Talked about this one before too when we were talking about hygge. And hygge, like books that make you want to winter.
Yeah.
Yes. A Year of Living Danishly. My 12 Months Unearthing the Secrets of the World's Happiest Country by Helen Russell. She is a UK reporter that her husband got a job with Lego and they moved to Denmark.
So yeah, she is deciding like he's offered this job and she's like, well, I'm just going to make this into a whole experience, And so she kind of documents it. I think they're from, was it London?
Yes.
And then, that's how he said.
Yeah.
They leave the London home, friends and family for a year and move out to Denmark. The opportunity of discovering what makes this the happiest place on earth, because they have that statistic. They were voted happiest place on earth.
They self-voted that they're the happiest. So like they like sent out a survey, which I actually like, there are some countries that do votes and take it very seriously. Denmark is one of them.
They're serious.
Yes.
And she's like, why are they the happiest, basically? And that's kind of what the whole book is about, is trying to figure out why. So it talks from childcare, education, food, interior design. They talk about SAD, which we've talked about, seasonal affective disorder, taxes, sexism, and it's the whole journey about Denmark's take on all of those topics.
Yes.
And a lot of them I was like, that is pretty
sweet,
pretty smart. And then there's a couple where I was all,
maybe not my cup of tea. But the thing I loved about this book though is it made me way more curious about Denmark.
Oh yeah.
I was like, which I would go anywhere like learn more about culture. But I was specifically enthralled by learning more about Denmark's history, about their culture now and in the past. And also just when she would describe their summers and their winters and like they have cow seasons where they like have these cow celebrations, which is so charming. And since then when we read this, I followed a bunch of accounts on Instagram that show like cultural events in Denmark. And I think it's just like a really charming place to live.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Yeah. It really was this incredible, again, love letter to Denmark and how they live life. And if you fully embrace it, you too can be so happy.
You can be so happy. No, she had a great sense of humor about it though, because it's a very different culture from the from the UK.
Yeah.
And so I felt like, well, just a different culture from London, because even within the UK, there's a wide variety of cultures across all 4 countries. Maybe 5. I don't know. It's unclear. But I loved how she handled like the humor in it. Like, and so it's a great read.
It really was a fun one. Whether you're reading it by yourself or with a group, it's delightful.
I'm like, if you're going to Denmark, for sure read it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you read it, you'll want to go.
Oh, yes.
100%.
Okay. Moving on to number 5. I was really excited about this one, which is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I grew up on this series, watching it with my mom, all
of them.
And then I got the books and I started reading them on my own.
Also, the main actress then was like the Queen in Rain. And I was like, oh my gosh, which I also thought was really fun to watch.
That was a good show.
Anyways,
I was on the CW.
I know.
I enjoyed it as well.
Me too. But I was like, now I think watching it now, I'd be like, I wish it was spicier. I'd be like, could it be a little spicy? Anyways, keep going.
Okay, how do I bring it back?
We don't need to. We deviate back.
Anne of Green Gables, we all fell in love with Prince Edward Island.
Yes.
And they have really run with this.
Yep.
So they have a lot of tourism specific for people who want to learn more about, Ellen Montgomery, Anne of Green Gables. So if you go, you can absolutely do tours and do the whole thing. But in general, the island itself is it was such a part of the book.
Oh, yeah.
Like Anne's so emotional and dramatic and, just everywhere she went.
She's like the white wave.
She would just throw herself, onto the grasses on the beach or something, So you just felt like everywhere you go on this island, Anne has been there almost. Like there's this imprint of her. And it looks beautiful, right? Like it's just a gorgeous area in general, on top of having so much nostalgia for, me specifically growing up, but I'm sure many of us. And
it's true.
Again, when I think about it, you have that like feeling of just like, the island.
And I mean, like tourism is such a big part of their economy because of this book. And also this book is huge on a global level. And so I think Prince Edward Island, like so many people think of Anne when they think of it.
Yes.
And so it's a book that's really impacted an economy, which is very interesting.
With that, did you see this little fact I put in here?
No.
It says visitors come from around the world, especially from Japan, where Anne of Green Gables is part of their school curriculum.
Yes.
So they love to come and celebrate it.
Japan has like this deep love of Anne, which is so fascinating.
I know.
That's like a really fascinating subculture. And as you mentioned, it's in their curriculum, but also they have like a lot of like fan art and like spin-offs. So that's an interesting deep dive.
I know. I'm fascinated as to the why, but
I'm happy about it. Because she's Canadian and we're not Canadian, but we're like just south. So I'm like, I feel like we have like, it's like natural that it's part of our curriculum. A lot of like Canadian authors are in our curriculum. So it's just so interesting that Japan has also this love of Anne, which I love.
I know. I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And is this rude to say that I'm like, maybe just her red hair even might stand out in a crowd.
Oh, she's so vibrant.
She
had to have red hair, right? Just like with her personality, Anne is one of those people who just feels everything big. She feels love and hatred and sadness and happiness. Everything's so big for her as a character. And I feel like that vibrant hair is like, she's just living really big. I know.
It's perfect.
I love her.
We love it. It's one of our favorite books of all time. So we were happy to see it here. Okay, we'll move on to number 6, which is The Great Alone by Kristin Hannah, who we've talked about her many times for The Nightingale.
Yes.
And then we read The Great Alone afterwards, I believe. And it's all based in Alaska in the 70s.
Fascinating. Okay, so Alaska in the 70s, which you learn a lot about in this book, was kind of like the final Wild
Frontier.
West. of America. You know, like pretty much all of continental US was like followed the laws of the land. One thing that was really interesting about Alaska is it is kind of this wilderness area. The landscape is gorgeous and dangerous, treacherous and beautiful. Like, and it also is so far away that they kind of create their own culture and laws. In the 70s specifically, she was trying to bring to light, you know, because Kristin Hannah dives so deep into research when she starts to write her books. She wanted to create this snapshot of culture at that time in a place that doesn't often get much voice. And so it was fascinating to read. I feel like the characters, like she always does, are just, she brings their humanity right to the surface of the page. And you're immediately invested. But also the land there was such a character in the book. You know, from the animals to just the dangers.
It has a very like isolation kind of feel to it as well. Like there's like this beauty in its isolation. And that it's still wild and untapped and you know, there's still so much to explore. And then there's the dangers that come along with it. And the basis of the story, we read this one quite a long time ago, but if I remember right, it's like there's these two war vets from like Vietnam. And one of them's like, if I die, I want you to have my cabin in Alaska. He passes away. So he moves his whole family. I can't remember where they're based, but then they move into this cabin in Alaska. And it's like their story from that point on. And they definitely run into like, is it grizzly bears? And they have their shotgun is like always by the door kind of a thing. And it's just, well, I don't want to get into all of the different things they run into. But basically, Alaska was interesting because it's like, while I was also scared of Alaska and a little bit like, I don't know, like it sounds very dangerous. Again, it's from the 70s. I was equally just as drawn to it and being like, oh, that sounds amazing and gorgeous and wild. And I really want to go there. I have yet to go to Alaska. My husband hasn't either, but his family has all gone multiple times. And so we've seen the photos. It looks gorgeous. Alaska is incredible. I'll get there one day. Maybe to see the Aurora Borealis.
Actually, I was just going to say,
those are coming up.
I think that my in-laws, they invited us, if they go up there, for a year from now.
Oh, wow.
Is when it's supposed to be the most epic. And so they're on a list. And I'm all cool.
Ooh.
I'd love to be able to go.
Well, I want this
incredible.
list. So, Great Alone, Alaska. That's another wonderful book. Check it out. Kristin Hannah is an incredible writer.
Oh, yeah.
So anything she writes is great.
All of her books are high recommend. She's just a very engaging author. And I think my favorite part of this book was just how resourceful people had to be, because it kind of reminded me of like the Iditarod and like Balto and that whole story, you know, and just like not having the accessibility to resources like we do in the middle of a city, you know. So very interesting to just learn how they lived off the land, and they had such a symbiotic relationship with the land. Loved it.
It even reminds me, Alaska, you're right. I feel like everyone's like on their own little island in Alaska, wherever they live, because they're so spread out. My husband grew up in a tiny town in Wyoming, and he was telling me about like when they would go to the grocery store, it was like once a month, because it was a 2-hour drive to the grocery store to really stock up, and they'd each get a cart. It would be like 5 carts because they had like eight people in their family, and they'd just fill them up and then stock them for the whole month. When his mom went into labor, same thing. She was following a snow plow in Wyoming trying to get to the hospital.
Fascinating.
Because she was going into labor for like over an hour. Like it's just not like pop down the road for any of it, you know. And so it felt very wild to me when he was telling me these stories. You know, in Alaska, I'm sure in the 70s is very much so like that, but times 10.
Yeah, in
its isolation. But that's the beauty in it too.
I know. It's cool.
It's the beauty.
I'm like, we got to get to Alaska.
Okay, I'm really excited about this next one.
Oh, yeah.
So, number 7 is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And this one, it wasn't so much the exact, like the country or state. It was a very specific place, which is the Bodleian Library in Oxford.
We wanted to interrupt this podcast to tell you about a very important event that is happening at LiteraryCrate.com.
Oh my gosh, tell us.
I know. On February 21st, Lunicorns will get early access to the Vampire Academy collector's edition box set. So this box set is gorgeous. It has features we've never done before, which we always try and do something a little special, but this one is pretty epic. It drops on February 21st to Lunicorns, and it opens to the public on the 22nd. And if you're like, Alix, what's a Lunicorn? I can tell you. A Lunicorn is our nickname for our membership group. Our membership group is a group of readers just like you, but they come back to LitJoy and get extra perks. So they have early access. There's Lunicorn exclusive items. There's extra Lunicorn discounts. And we have a Facebook membership group where we do lives and we reveal product ahead of time, where we ask a bunch of questions or feedback on what product we want or they want us to do. So it's kind of just like this really cool book club, nerdy book club that we have at LitJoy. So make sure to check out our Lunicorns membership. It's titled Membership at the top of our website. And if you're just here for Vampire Academy, it opens to the public on the 22nd. So,
so excited for that.
Yes, me too. Which I went to in June.
So jealous.
It was so rad.
Don't tell me all about it.
I know. Oxford is such a cool place. First of all, Oxford, I'm just a little feminist there. So I was like learning about the history and I'm all, where's all the women? But Oxford originally, and many colleges started this way, especially in England, with being deeply connected to the church. And it was like young boys that would go and get their education there. And then it has developed into one of the most prestigious colleges in the world. My husband did a semester at Oxford when I think he was in graduate school or undergrad. I don't know. He's got a bunch of degrees. One of his degrees.
Yeah.
He's very into school. He went to Oxford. And so he took me back there and took me on a tour. And it is just, the architecture is so charming and the Bodleian is epic. And it's just a really iconic, like, campus.
Yeah.
And there's dozens of colleges there. So it's not just Oxford. There's like different sub colleges all throughout there. So just students everywhere. It's just like the closest thing to like a Hogwarts feeling that I've had as far as like academia goes. So
I love that. And so when I read Discovery of Witches, book one specifically takes place there in Oxford. You know, Diana, who's the main character, she is over there. She's giving lectures. She's a teacher. Is she a teacher? I'm trying to remember. Or no, she's mostly doing research for her, like, thesis.
She's a professor.
And I know at one point she gives like a lecture.
Yes. No. She's a PhD student.
Yeah, I think she's finishing her thesis to then become a professor.
Something like that. She's super smart.
Don't quote us on that. But
smarty pants.
Basically, so this is like a huge part of her experience in the first book. And this is where her, the love interest, Matthew, he notices her on campus and like, what's different about her? Then there's a TV series as well.
I loved it.
It was great.
It was so good.
3 seasons because there's 3 books. The whole series is fantastic. What I love about Diana's writing is that she is basically a historian. She's very good at documenting things incorporating those into her books.
Yes.
And so you're going to get a lot of really good history and her love of wine.
Yes, her love of wine. Diana's a historian.
Yeah.
And Deborah is as well.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
They're all interchangeable because they're all into learning and into history. And so that is where, like after book 1, I was just like, I just want to go to Oxford. I want to go to the library because they describe the library so many times. And in the movie too, they show it. That's the right way.
Okay. So the Bodleian Library in real life looks slightly different than the one in the movie. The movie one, they had to make a whole set for it.
Oh.
The Bodleian, but I would highly recommend the Bodleian tour. I would recommend any Oxford tour. Mm-hmm. The fun thing about Oxford is they all live in kind of like these rectangle-shaped dorms for the college. And in the middle is like the grassy area. And that kind of courtyard style is, how the Bodleian looks. Yeah. And it's just a really historic feeling. You feel like, have you ever been somewhere where you feel like you're stepping through history by being there? Mm-hmm. That's how I felt in Oxford. I also felt like that at a few places in London and in Rome specifically. Rome was you could feel the energy of history there. It was very impactful. And that's kind of how Oxford felt, is you wanted to be a part of the learning there because it had been so historical. And I felt like reading this book, oh man, it was just, Discovery of Witches is like a delight for your senses because you want to drink the wine with them and you want to like
hold the old books.
Yeah, hold the old book, squirrel away with an old book.
Yeah.
And you just wanted to like make out with Matthew.
Also that.
And his French estate. Also, France comes up. It's great.
Yes. There are lots of locations within the series.
Yes.
But for me, the one that stood out was like, I want to go to Oxford.
Yes.
Because that's, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. There's Oxford, but there's also his French manor. But there's also Boston, Massachusetts, where her aunts live because she's American.
Yes.
Yes.
So many good places. That's where I'm like, this book is full of lots of fun places to add to your list to travel to. We did a whole book club on this one as well. It was really fun. And
I just thought two more. Vatican and New Orleans are also in there. She does a good job of taking you on these journeys.
Well, and then in book 2, you actually get to go back in history.
Yes.
Can't get too into that for spoiler.
I know. Tyler was like, book 2 was where he was like, oh my gosh. Because he like going back and learning about like living through history during the medieval times. He was so into it.
It's such a fun romp through history, you know?
Yes,
and I feel like that's where Deborah, the author, was really excited because she's like, I could use all my knowledge and I could put it into like a paranormal fantasy historical fiction. So I was like, this is so my jam, all the things that are happening here.
I know.
So yeah, that's number 7.
Love it. Okay, number 8 I thought was clever to put on the list. Very clever. The Fault in Our Stars by John Green and Amsterdam specifically. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of John Green.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm a fan of his writing and a huge fan of him as a person. It's kind of categorically because he is a great person. Yeah. And I think that comes out in his writing.
The whole family, I'm just like, because we follow the Greens on
we
like TikTok and
Hank
stuff.
Green as well.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that family is just next level in a good way.
For sure.
Yeah.
So this book is about a young girl who is a teenager diagnosed with cancer.
It's Hazel. Yeah, Hazel and Gus.
And Gus is her love interest, also has cancer. And it kind of goes through their journey as kids having to deal with this terminal disease, which is hard and unfair. Yeah. And their story, I think, is really worth hearing.
Oh, yeah. The book is incredible.
Yeah.
Like the whole book is fantastic. And when I was thinking about this book, I always immediately think of Amsterdam.
Yes.
And I just got to go there last year. And I was thinking about the book the whole time because, so Augustus, who's the love interest for Hazel in the book, he knows that she's really obsessed with this one book. And it's by Peter van Houten, I don't remember his last name. And so he reads it and he's like, that was an incredible book. And so they bond over this book. And the author is based in Amsterdam. And he uses his Make-A-Wish to take them both to Amsterdam to have this like romantic date, you know, while they still have the time to travel. And I think they still had like cords in the nose for oxygen and things like that. She does,
yes, because she has...
So she's progressing.
Yeah, her cancer specifically has just affected her ability to get enough oxygen, you know. And so she uses... It's unclear if they can even make it.
Yeah.
And so, but yes, the Amsterdam moment is just so heartfelt. And I'm not going to spoil anything that happens in Amsterdam because I feel like that's too spoilery. But I did love the moment where she gets to go to the museum.
I cannot pronounce.
What's that?
No,
just where
because it's on here, but it's the
Anne Frank house.
They go to the Anne Frank house. They do go to a different museum.
Yes,
they go to 2.
Multiple. But the Anne Frank one was the one I was thinking in. She has to walk up a bunch of stairs.
Yeah,
and I think that part of the book made me want to go to that museum specifically, especially because she was having a hard time as this very young girl, breathing and getting up all these steps. And you think about Anne Frank and the injustice that she had to face. And I think there was just like, that's the thing that John Green's so good at is that how he can create those parallels between the two. Yeah. And I thought that was really beautiful. It made me really want to go there.
Yeah.
So
it really is very charming, just like they describe in the book with the canals. And I love the moment just when they got to take the canal boat to this fancy restaurant. It's like the orangey, whatever. Found out it's not actually a real restaurant.
You're like, I Googled it.
I was a little bummed when I found out it wasn't real, but I was like, I get it. And they go to a different like modern art museum. They do the Anne Frank. They do some other locations and end up on a park bench and have a sweet moment too. But the whole time I was just like, I want to go to Amsterdam. And I got to go and last year, and that was incredible. It's such a fun, bustling town that's all very tight knit with the canals and everything. So,
yep.
Anyways, Fault in the Stars is a great book just in general. I think they're from Indiana, and then they go over to Amsterdam. So, and it was just this, like you said, beautiful moment that made you fall in love with it as well. To see them, how impactful it was for them to experience it.
Yes.
Well, moving on.
All right. Number 9, could not. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's just this little cult classic. Pride and Prejudice is just like the best love story towards, Victorian England.
Yeah.
Like, just, I mean, you can literally, the most beautiful place I think I've ever witnessed where there's a man-made structure is Chatsworth, which is where they filmed Pemberley.
Yeah.
And that's in the Peak District of England. Is that correct?
Yes. In Derbyshire. So I just put where like England in general because in the book, obviously, they are actually traveling throughout England. There's many locations that exist and don't exist at the same time. So it's kind of an interesting one. I put down some of them where you will see them in the movie with like Keira Knightley. Is it in the 1995 version?
It came out in 95?
I think
we are ancient.
I know. I'm like, it was
oh my gosh. Joe writes the great work of Joe Wright.
2005.
Oh, I was like, my gosh.
I was like,
it's still been a while. It's been 20 years. So old. Yes, but Joe Wright's great work in Pride and Prejudice.
So we didn't do this intentionally, but we kind of took a Pride and Prejudice tour on our own when we were over in England on like a girls' trip. And we went to Derbyshire. We went and saw Chatsworth, took the whole tour. We literally started our day off doing tea, high noon tea there. Yes. Amazing. We were there till it closed.
Yes.
And I wanted more time.
They were like, please leave the gardens.
Because what I didn't know when you go to visit Chatsworth is like, you want the whole tour of that. It's like a mansion. It's this incredible estate that has been passed down in these really...
Yeah, the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire, I think, is who owns the property. They
get passed down. And so you're there for hours. And then they're like, oh yeah, don't forget we have acres and acres of these incredible gardens. And we're like, oh no.
We jaunted.
Yes. It's incredible because everyone who's ever been, in a sense, like the owner of that home, they kind of leave their own personal touch. They add to the garden. They add to the artwork. Yes. They leave their little mark. And so it's fascinating to kind of see just the evolution within Chatsworth. And you can be fully immersed. They have tons of Pride and Prejudice stuff there when you get to the gift shop.
Yeah, the gift shop was pretty fun.
But it was incredible. And that was like stop 1 for us. And then the next one is we went to...
Stourhead Gardens.
Stourhead in Wiltshire. Wiltshire? Yes. Wiltshire.
Which is down kind of towards the bottom, like the southwest area of England is Wiltshire. And gorgeous.
And this one, not in the book. I just put it in, it's more in the movie again from the Keira Knightley movie. It's the Temple of Apollo that's like overlooking the lake, like the estate of Stourhead. And that's where he's all, I love you, but I shouldn't. And you're inferior, but I love you. And she's like, you've just insulted me in every possible way.
She's like, you liked me against your better judgment.
So that's like where they filmed that, was underneath that little.
And we went up there and took a bunch of photos of us like jumping off of it and professing our love to a fake Darcy.
It's taller than you'd think.
It's high up.
Like if you jump, you have to kind of tuck and roll.
Yeah.
Just FYI.
It's like 10 feet off the ground. And we were like, jump. And then we were like, oh my gosh.
We're like, oh,
we're still falling. No, Stourhead is gorgeous.
Oh, it was so
and there's this
beautiful
thing that like the English do so well, which is like quaint gift shops. Like every gift shop in England is full of like old lady quaint paraphernalia, which is totally our aesthetic. Like I'm like, there is a cute teacup in every gift shop, and they've always got like biscuits, and there's always like a tea shop next to it. It's just like, I don't know how they do it.
Darling.
Gardening, like tools.
They know their demographic. Let's just say that.
We're there. I'm like, I know. And I went to Bath this last year, and Bath is another fantastic one that gets brought up a lot in Jane Austen novels because the aristocrats would summer in Bath.
Yeah, that's where they would go for spa time.
Yeah, like Bath feels like a little Italy inside of the UK is what it reminded me of. It feels kind of like Italy felt. But it is like resort spa. And we bathed in Bath in like the Roman baths, and not the ones that are the museum, but like the aqueducts are still there.
I drank the water that they would like go to drink the restorative waters, and it's bad.
It was no good.
It's not good.
She didn't feel restored, but
I was all
debunked.
I was like spitting it back into my cup. I am not healed from
Thank
this.
you.
It has that sulfuric kind of, smell to it and stuff. But Bath is so cool because they use the same white stone to build the entire city. So it feels like somebody just like transplanted it there.
Yes.
Because it's all the same.
Okay. The cool thing about Bath history is the actual waters are said to be sacred. And they don't know anything prehistorically, but what they do know is that the Druids and like Celtic culture inhabited Bath and would bathe in these marshlands because it was like marshy. They didn't have like roads. They would like partake in this healing waters. And then the Romans came through and they're like, clearly everything is Rome, including this place. And so they built the Roman baths. And then when the Romans left, they built over the Roman baths. And just recently have they started to uncover these baths and build museums around it. So if you're in Bath, 100% do the museum tour of the Roman baths. That was fascinating. Also, I think it's on Tuesday nights, but there's a few weeknights where if you just show up outside of the Roman baths, there are city volunteers that take you on a walking tour of Bath for free. And they take you all around. Like you go to that, oh man, I forgot what it's called. Son of a, but it's like that big, huge apartment that's rounded.
Yes.
You know, it's like it's the crescent. It's called the Royal Crescent.
Yeah.
Royal Crescent.
It's, I know in Persuasion, they talk a lot about it.
So there's a Royal Crescent, never owned by royalty, by the way. It's just always been wealthy apartments. And they're like apartments, but they're mansions that are stuck together.
Yeah.
And they're like, usually there's people who live in each flat. Like there are some people who are wealthy enough to like own all 5 floors, but a lot of them are just individual flats now that you can purchase for like $1 million to like $5 million, depending.
No biggie.
Yeah. Just like, and then there's like a whole like row of houses that you'll tour. And then there's also a Jane Austen tour, which was fantastic. There's a Mary Shelley tour, which was fantastic because so many of these authors had a moment in Bath. So I'm like, another great place to go. Thanks, Jane Austen.
Thanks for that. Also, we just sold you on Bath.
I know. There you go. Sorry, I got really into it. I was like, that was a fun day.
Yeah. Just Jane Austen in general could get you guys to see so many places, right? And through all of her books. And
it's true.
I know. I'm like, this one was a little bit of a gray area when I put it down, but I was like, England in general.
Anywhere.
Yes.
I know.
But they exist. Go to these places.
I know. Okay. This one is one Kelly put on there because
for funsies.
Kelly's awesome.
I put Twilight on here because it legit created a huge phenomenon, right? Around going to see Forks, Washington.
Yes.
And Forks was like, all right, let's do this.
They're like, we can do this.
Come to us.
Yeah.
It's again, kind of a quaint little town on the coast of the Northwest.
Yeah. Pacific Northwest. That's where I'm from.
Yep. Kind of like that Oregon, Seattle vibe. And Washington's no exception. It rains there the majority of the time. It's constantly foggy, that kind of a thing. Perfect if you were a vampire that sparkles to hide out.
1000%. Twilight came out when I grew up in a town called Auburn, Washington, which is right in between Tacoma and Seattle. So when Twilight came out, I was like, clearly it would be here. Like, I remember because, flare pants were a thing. And I just remember like from the bottom of my pants to like mid-calf was just always wet. It just like absorbed all the water because it was always raining.
Yeah, it's like, I was looking here. It says it's about 4 hours away. Forks is 4 hours away from Seattle.
Yeah. So what it is Seattle, Washington kind of has like this outlet, this peninsula. Yeah. And then like the Puget Sound. And Seattle's right here on the Puget Sound. And then Forks is over here. So if you did like a ferry and then rented a car, because Forks is on more towards the Pacific.
Gotcha.
Whereas Seattle is right on the Puget Sound, which is kind of like this large delta.
Yeah.
So, it's like an inlet, you know. So, but yeah, that was like the setting of my childhood was like small, rainy town.
And it like charmed us all after reading the Twilight, right?
I guess, yeah.
I'd never been at the time anywhere near that kind of a coast. And it has a very, for me, very magical.
Oh yeah, it's very mystical
quality. When we finally went to like Oregon
I love the Oregon coast.
We took our kids and there was fog up at the mountains. And I'd always tell them that's where the unicorns live. And to this day, my kids are like, if they see fog, they're like, that's where the unicorns are. The unicorns live in the fog, you know? So we've made it kind of magical for them, but living there would be different.
Yeah, but I would have like a beach house in like the Oregon coast.
Yeah. Oh, I love it there.
Me too.
But you don't get a lot of just sunshiny days.
No, you go there to just like, you go for more of just the like the healing energy that comes from like the ocean and the rain and the fog and yeah.
Oh yeah. Like if I was an author, I would for sure like tuck in on a place on the coast there because it has that like perfect weather and environment for you to feel like it's like that rainy day vibes where you just want your coffee or your tea and you're just going to focus.
You could even do like 100% yes. Yeah. I outlined my whole fantasy novel when we were there last time. Haven't worked on it since. So I'm like, I got to go back out there.
Let's do it.
I know. And another thing about it though is like you could reread Twilight while you were there. And it would just be like a delightful experience, like the Pacific Coast.
Imagine? This is like any millennials like, oh, I had the Twilight phase, right? Like I was like a newlywed at the time when Twilight was really hitting the theaters and the fandom was really like this cult behind it. It just was like a new phenomenon that hadn't happened since.
It was so interesting.
It was like Harry Potter and then Twilight.
Yes.
Like that's how big it was.
It was like Harry Potter had like kind of was like wrapping up. And all these adults had like aged out of like they were, you know, like we were no longer the age of the characters in Harry Potter. And so Twilight came out and it was a phenomenon because never had like movies started to come out before the full series was released. That kind of just hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Like books to movies was mostly standalones, like investing in a huge fantasy series like Lord of the Rings could justify it, but it just wasn't really the same.
Yeah.
And there was this YA fantasy, which didn't happen with YA. Like there was this YA fantasy in like rural or just like small town Washington. And everybody was obsessed. And like I remember going to movies with like all of my friends who were all like, you know, college age, high school age, like that phase. And then I remember going out with like all of my sister-in-laws to see the movie again. And that was like my age through like 45. And like all of us invested. Yeah. Exactly. Which is just fascinating. Because they're not like...
They're not great movies.
But they're so great.
And it's the experience of it, right? Because I was there the premiere night. Just a theater full of women just freaking out.
Riotous.
Freaking out. I remember that moment in the last book. You know, where they change up the like fight scene from the movie. The movie
I know.
Straight.
I did like this.
Oh my gosh. Like there were riots in the theater. Everyone is losing their shit. They're freaking out because it deviated from the book a little bit, you know, and then it kind of comes back. But I was just like, what an experience to go through, to live through.
Awesome.
But so Twilight, and it's cracking me up because when I was reading about the tourism there now, they're like Washington Forks has really embraced the fandom. It's now evident. You can see in nearly every store window, there's a cardboard cutout of Bella and Edward. Special Twilight restaurant menus, you know, like they're just like, we're going to go for it, right?
Doing it.
Yeah. So
it wasn't even filmed there, but I just love that Forks is like, we've got this.
I know. There's just like, they have these like commemorative signs all over.
I love it.
And, you know, people can stop and take their picture with it and stuff. So I'm all,
that's amazing.
It's a phenomenon from the books, right? So had to put it on there. And then the last one, which I kind of put on, is like my bridge to what we will be doing.
Yes.
Where we're going to be talking about fantasy locations that we'd like to visit is The Hobbit. A little bit of crossover with the whole series in general by J.R.R. Tolkien. Because you can go visit the Shire. And it is in Matamata, New Zealand.
Yes.
And it's on the North Island. They filmed on both the South and the North Island for the entire series. But if you want to go visit literally a Shire, you can go and visit it.
The whole set was built out.
Yeah.
I'm like, tell me about your experience there. Just like I want to hear about the meal and all of it, your little tour.
It was incredible. So I was able to go about 5 years ago to...
Oh my gosh, time flies.
I know.
Okay, keep going.
We flew to Australia. My husband's job sent him out there. And I was like, I don't care what you got to do. Figure out a job that's over there in New Zealand so we can go hop over. So he did. He found someone and he's like, oh, it's perfect. I set up a meeting. So we only had 2 days there. But I was like, I don't care what we're doing. We're going to the Shire.
Yep.
And so we went there in June, which is actually their winter, but it was still gorgeous and stunning. And they kept being like, no, it's not, like the locals. And I'm like, you guys, it's so green here. It's a green we don't even see in where we live. Very bright. Anyway, so it's fascinating because when you take the tour, when you get there, it is just this rolling hills of green and millions of sheep. And then you take a bus and it actually like takes you right to the entrance, but you have to pass all these like security gates first. And it is a working sheep farm. Actually. And
amazing.
That's what they use. They don't even use like lawnmowers. They just let the sheep go crazy.
Can you imagine being if reincarnation is real, I want to be reincarnated as a Shire sheep.
A Shire sheep, please.
That's what I want to be.
And our tour was kind of special because we did the last evening tour and they offer this, I think, once a week where they allow the very last tour once a week to do a Hobbiton dinner.
Amazing.
And I was freaking out because they only had one spot left. And so I was like, I don't care. I'm going. So like we booked the ticket and we got there and they were like, we're sold out. And I'm like, well, I do have a significant other with me. Like, do I just need to leave them?
You're like, wah, wah.
And I was like, I don't care if I have to pull up a stool. I'm like, by the way, the tickets for the dinner are pretty pricey. So I was like, you guys, I'm sure you want the money. So they worked it out. They're like, we'll fit one more seat in.
Yes.
And because we checked it like daily. But I would highly recommend that because you're the last tour and you get this cool like evening sunset that you can't get in the direct daylight otherwise. And there's nobody else, just you and your tour gets to go walk around the whole Shire. And they have like 40 or 45 little Hobbiton homes. And there's only one of them where the door actually really opens.
And that's Bilbo, right? And
they have one that's like a full working one that they don't let anyone into. That was like Bilbo's home. And then they have the facade for it where the door opens, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But you can walk in and just take a picture out.
Yeah. So it's like you in the door and the Shire's behind you.
Yeah. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but the Shire actually, they built it, filmed Lord of the Rings, and then they took it down. They completely got rid of it. And then they're like, wait, we want to do a trilogy for The Hobbit. And they're like, well, crap. So they rebuilt the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
And then they were like, all right, we're going to make this like a permanent thing.
They're like, leave it here.
We don't know when this is going to be needed again.
Yeah. So the sheep farmer's like, as long as I keep getting to use the grass.
Yeah. And they said it's open to visitors. They see an average of 300,000 people per year.
Amazing. I was like, what a great homey one to end on.
And it's so cute because when you finish the tour, you come down on the lake that you see with the Green Dragon Inn, right?
Yes.
So it's called. And that's where they make this big fanfare about like letting you in all at the same time to the Hobbiton dinner. It's exactly what you would imagine. Like these big, like rough wooden tables and chairs with just heaps and mounds of food and all kinds of meats and pastries. And it's just like so indulgent and fun. And I was just freaking out. I was like, picture, like film.
I know. We've had some pretty iconic meals in our lives.
Yeah.
Like we've kind of like created some opportunities there. So I'm like,
it was so fun.
Yes. From like the pub and dancing night we were in this tiny town in Mizzadern the night before we went to Chatsworth. It's so small. It was like 56 people lived in Mizzadern.
Yeah.
And we got this little Airbnb there. And we thought we got the whole house, but we only got like 2 rooms of the house. So we had to pack like 9 women into 2 rooms.
We did. And this poor family was like, hello.
And they're like, we might not put ours on Airbnb anymore.
We didn't realize literally till we got there.
Yeah.
And the family was like, here are your rooms. And we're like,
yes.
Oh, you're not leaving.
Yeah. No, they were there.
Oh, you're okay.
And we're like, whoopsie doopsies. So then they invite us. They were so kind though. They invited us to like this town dance.
Yeah.
And it was like this whole dance. Like
they were raising funds
for like a missionary service project, but like we were all sweaty and dancing and like that was a really fun night. And then the next morning the tea and at Chatsworth we got up really early and drove to Chatsworth to have like tea for breakfast. And I don't know, I feel like if you just kind of say yes to some of these opportunities, like it was so like serendipitous that you were able to go to that Hobbiton dinner. And that it was like the day you were there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know, put good energy out there. Comes back in good food.
Lots of Hobbiton food.
Yes.
Oh, well, this was fun.
I know, that was fun.
And I'm sure we'll do another list on some fantasy places too. But I was like,
yes,
these are all places that are on my list, if I haven't already gone on my bucket list that I would like to go to. And again, this is a book your ticket, books that make you nostalgic for travel.
I know.
So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to rate and review us so that we can keep doing podcasts. It's just something we love to do.
And like a good book, don't forget to recommend us to your friends.